Chapter 14 New Skill. You've leveled up to level 2 Human. You've gained 0.2 stat points in Strength, Agility, and Constitution. You've gained 0.5 stat points in Intelligence. You have gained 2 attribute points. You've leveled up to level 2 Necromancer Apprentice. You've gained 0.1 stat points in Strength and Constitution, 0.3 stat points in Agility, and 0.5 stat points in Intelligence. You have gained 4 attribute points. Michael hardly registered the notifications. It felt like he was about to die, his whole body burning as if it were engulfed in flames. A section of his left arm looked mutilated, horrifying to even glance at. Suppressing the urge to scream, Michael took out one of the health potions he'd bought from the Supers Association store. He hadn't imagined he'd need it less than 2 hours after first stepping into the Land of Origin. Despite the warnings about not treating the Land of Origin like a game, part of him still had. It fueled his excitement, filling him with visions of leveling up like the protagonist in some cheap novel, rising to the peak of this world and beyond. Perhaps it was his teenage optimism that kept him hopeful. Or maybe he was unconsciously slipping into the role of an 18-year-old despite already being an adult back on Earth. With shaky hands, Michael poured half of the health potion over his injured arm and drank the rest. Gradually, the pain began to fade. The potion worked like magic, and Michael watched in awe as new flesh formed over his wounds. A scar remained, likely due to the potion's grade, but he didn't care. As long as the terrible pain was gone, he could deal with the rest later. I almost died, Michael thought. Death in the Land of Origin wasn't permanent, but he'd undeniably come close, against one of the weakest monsters here, no less. I'm pathetic, too naive, too inexperienced, too reckless. If I just kept my distance from that acid slime, I wouldn't be in this mess. What Michael didn't realize was that his performance, while far from perfect, would have impressed most veteran awakeners. He had not only succeeded in killing a monster on his first encounter, but had also taken down an opponent several levels higher than him. Despite being just a slime, it was still superior to him. Michael also misunderstood that, though slimes were among the weakest monsters in the Land of Origin, that reputation applied only from a certain perspective. The writer of the post calling slimes weak was already a powerful being qualified to look down on slimes. For many, especially new awakeners, slimes were no joke, and underestimating them had been Michael's first mistake. Both the Michael from Earth and the one from Aurora shared a tendency to be unrelenting with themselves. Growing up as an orphan had forced him to mature quickly and shoulder responsibilities, leaving him with little patience for his own mistakes. This same trait made him feel little sense of accomplishment at defeating the slime he subconsciously disdained as weak. After sitting in silence for a long while, Michael's messy emotions finally calmed, and he began to focus on other things. This scar won't follow me to the real world, right? Michael glanced uncertainly at the ugly scar on his left arm. Something remarkable about the bodies of awakeners in the Land of Origin was how closely they mirrored those in the real world. They could be considered perfect clones, in sync with their counterparts. This replication was so complete that even pain was experienced just as intensely here as in reality. Recalling his recent encounter with the acid slime sent a shiver down Michael's spine. I hope I don't develop PTSD over slimes. That would be too pathetic. After examining the scar a bit longer, Michael decided it was unlikely to follow him back to reality. The primary function of this body was to synchronize any strength he gained here with his real body. However, it seemed he'd have to bear the scar here until he died. According to posts on the Supers Association forum, an awakener's body in the Land of Origin functioned much like a real one, independent from the original, requiring food and other sustenance. It wasn't just data like in a game. This was also why death, here only counted if the entire body or major organs were destroyed. Losing a limb wouldn't kill him, but it would leave him crippled in this world. To regain a fully functional body, his current one would have to be destroyed so a new one could reconstruct, the next time his consciousness entered the land of origin. To put it simply, one could reconstruct a body they didn't like by killing themselves. However, aside from the fact that many were not sick enough to consider this, even seasoned awakeners would rather be crippled than end their own lives. This was because death in this world, while not permanent, still resulted in a 10% permanent reduction in all stats. Not many could afford that loss. So even though death wasn't truly final here, most awakeners took their lives seriously. By now, Michael had recovered from his life-and-death battle with the acid slime and could finally focus on something he'd been putting off. I leveled up. Though his performance against the acid slime left much to be desired, Michael wouldn't turn down the experience points. He had a problem with the slime, not with its generous experience reward. Status: Name: Michael Norman. Class: Necromancer Apprentice. Level 2-1. Exp 8250. Strength 1603. Agility 1905. Constitution 1403. Intelligence 5510. Attribute points 6. Skills: Undead Summoning, Undead Revival, Detect, Basic Shot, New. Talent: Infinite Evolution. Class Skill: Contract Slot 0/4. Gift: Mark of Origin. Compared to how it looked when he first awakened, Michael's status screen now appeared significantly different. The first thing he noticed wasn't the change in his level or stats but his skills section. Aside from the 2 class skills he'd had since awakening, entering the land of origin had granted him 2 more, which stood out. Michael already knew the function of his first 3 skills. Undead Summoning, a primary skill that allowed him to summon and dismiss undead at will. Undead Revival, his true core skill, enabling him to create undead summons in the first place. And Detect, a basic scouting skill used for gathering information. Now there was a new addition. Basic Shot, Basic Mastery Proficiency, 0.6%. Fires a single, accurate shot at the target with standard damage. Seems like something that belongs to the Archer class, Michael thought. Michael was, in fact, correct. Basic Shot wasn't just any ordinary skill for the Archer class. It was one of its core skills, akin to how Undead Revival was for him. But since this was an Archer class skill, how and why could Michael learn it? Class skills were called class skills, not because only one class could learn them, but because specific classes could maximize their potential. For example, Undead Revival was a skill other classes could technically learn, but non-necromancers couldn't make full use of it. Even if another awakener learned Undead Revival and Undead Summoning, the number of undead summons they could control would be limited, unlike necromancers like Michael, who unlocked extra slots with each level up. Interestingly, contract slots were also used to gauge talent for classes like necromancers and beast tamers. Just because 2 individuals awakened the same class didn't mean they were on equal footing, especially when it came to contract slots. For instance, Michael had 2 starting contract slots, gaining 2 more with each level. However, there were rare individuals with 5 starting slots, meaning that by level 10, while Michael would have 20 slots, they would have 50. This was one way classes reliant on contracts were graded. Returning to class skills weren't exclusive to specific classes but were optimized by them. When non-necromancer classes learned Undead Revival, they would start at basic mastery, and raising proficiency would be challenging. In contrast, necromancers like Michael would start at intermediate mastery for skills like Undead Revival or any necromancer-centric ability. This applied to other class systems as well. Michael successfully learned Basic Shot, but his mastery began at Basic Mastery, whereas archers would automatically start at Intermediate Mastery for this skill, whether they received it at Awakening or learned it later. This skill should make up for my terrible shooting a bit, Michael thought happily. He had no intention of avoiding more monsters just because of his experience with the acid slime. Though he didn't enjoy pain, who would? He wasn't a coward. Shifting his focus away from his new skill, Michael began to examine the changes that had occurred after leveling up. Name: Michael Norman. Class: Necromancer Apprentice. Level 2-1. Exp 8250. Strength 1603. Agility 1905. Constitution 1403. Intelligence 5510. Attribute points 6. Skills: Undead Summoning, Undead Revival, Detect, Basic Shot, New. Talent: Infinite Evolution. Class Skill: Contract Slot 0/4. Gift: Mark of Origin. My stats have increased, was the first thing Michael noticed. He hadn't felt anything earlier, which made sense, as pain had been all-consuming. But after seeing the digital representation of his stat increase, Michael paid attention to his body and finally noticed it. He stood up and tried a few movements to gauge how much his stats had risen. So this is what it means to level up, he thought in awe. Since his awakening, this was only the second time Michael felt his body was different. He figured it would only become more pronounced as he leveled up. Now he was only level 2, but what about when he reached levels like 50? By then, even his less relevant stats for his class, like strength and constitution, would likely reach superhuman levels. Among his stats, Michael noticed that intelligence had increased the most. However, it was currently useless, as he had no way to use mana yet. The intelligence stat didn't make one smarter. It simply represented an awakener's total mana and their ability to learn things quickly, like spells. Thanks to his human race and necromancer class, which each provided 0.5 stat points in intelligence, Michael now had almost 6 times the average intelligence of a typical human. The stat system for awakeners factored in their race to determine their strengths. Even before awakening, Michael had known races like elves existed in the land of origin, and some of these elves weren't native but from civilizations like Aurora, where awakeners also resided. For example, an elf with a strength stat of 1 would have it scaled according to their natural physique. So, if elves were naturally stronger than humans, a single point increase in their strength stat might equate to what would be 2 points for humans. This system reminded Michael of the class system, where some classes had inherent advantages over others. However, all these differences were meaningless to him now, as he was still lost in the middle of nowhere. The next biggest boost went to his agility stat, with the mage-type necromancer class surprisingly contributing the most points. Agility affects movement speed, reaction time, dodge ability, and attack speed. Michael wondered what a mage class like Necromancer would benefit from agility, but he made a note to research it later. After intelligence and agility, strength and constitution received the lowest enhancements. Strength impacted physical power, melee attack damage, carrying capacity, and physical feats. Constitution affected health, endurance, resistance to physical and elemental damage, and environmental factors. Michael knew these stats would have been even lower without the boosts from leveling up as a human. If his stats depended solely on his necromancer class, his mana pool might be vast, but even a lower-level physical class could probably take him down with a single punch. Despite the seemingly small gains, he felt his overall performance had improved by at least 30%. And this is only from one level up. I need more experience. The surge in power was addicting. Despite the ordeal with the slime, Michael had no intention of shying away. Ever since seeing that video of a demigod cultivator in action, he'd vowed to reach a similar level of strength. A single, bad encounter with a slime wasn't going to change that. However, the experience had taught him to be more cautious. If he were to face slimes again, he'd either have to use his brains or suppress them with power. He didn't consider himself dumb, but he wouldn't exactly call himself smart either. After all, an intelligent person wouldn't have just attacked a level 4 monster, regardless of its species, with the desperation of an experience-hungry dog, and he'd been just that. But if he wanted to use power to suppress any slimes he encountered, Michael's gaze drifted to his attribute points on the panel. Maybe, just maybe, they could help him. Attribute points. 6. Michael wouldn't claim to know much about his new reality just because he spent a few hours on the Supers Association forum. But thanks to those hours of studying, he could say he knew much more about awakeners now than before. Aside from a few other things, there was one thing all awakeners wanted regardless of race. Attribute points, with each point representing the entire power of an average individual of their respective race, an instant boost. And right now, Michael had 6 of these points he could use to instantly strengthen himself. Which stat would maximize these points and help me most right now? Michael wondered. At this moment, he needed something to boost his survivability and strength, and apart from external items, only these attribute points could help. Michael examined his stats, considering which of the 4 would best support him in his current situation. Strength 1.6, Agility 1.9, Constitution 1.4, Intelligence 5.5, Attribute points 6. Michael's initial location could be described as odd. At first glance, it didn't seem particularly dangerous, but it also couldn't be called safe. It might be a stretch to label it dangerous because of a single slime, but that slime, a genuine monster, also made this place questionable. What if there were more monsters, and what if they weren't slimes? Michael didn't like slimes, but he felt they were probably the best kind of monster he could currently handle solo. If the acid slime had a stat system, it would likely have allocated 90% of its stats to intelligence, 8% to agility, and the remaining 2% split between strength and constitution, just enough to live. This is rough estimation, but it was obvious that, despite being an acid slime, its constitution was minimal. Even with gun and bullet technology refined over 200 years, it shouldn't have been able to kill the slime by destroying its core embedded within its acidic body. It was only now, as Michael had time to think, that he realized just how incredibly lucky he'd been. If he had encountered any other monster, like a wolf, with 90% of its stats in agility, he'd probably be at home right now, cooking something for his cousin. Monsters were supernatural beings, so even a wolf's speed would be terrifying. A normal wolf is already faster than an average human, so a wolf monster would be a nightmare to escape. A slime, in contrast, was manageable. With a long-range weapon, it could be defeated without risking close contact. But without one, getting close enough to kill an acid slime was almost suicidal. Just one wrong step could lead to excruciating pain, a worse deterrent than even the consequences of death. I really hope there's no monster other than slimes in this building, Michael thought. As for hopping for no monsters at all, that wasn't his wish. He was greedy for the experience points. Okay, it's decided. I'll choose agility and constitution. For a necromancer to choose these stats seemed wasteful, but Michael had no choice. Right now, he was a fake necromancer without a single undead summon or spell to cast. Although intelligence was his most important stat, it felt useless at the moment. Ironically, investing in it felt like a waste. As for why he chose agility and constitution, the reasoning was simple. The latter to boost his health and endurance so he could survive longer, and the former so he could run from anything he couldn't defeat, or at least stay out of reach. He planned to put more points into agility between the two. I'm really a disgrace to necromancers. After a moment's thought, Michael stopped hesitating and began to increase his stats. He first placed 2 points into Constitution. Constitution 3.4. After increasing his Constitution by 2 points, Michael immediately felt different. A warm sensation spread through his body, leaving him with a subtle sense of increased health. The change was hard to pinpoint, but the most noticeable effect was on his mutilated left arm. Now, with 3 times the constitution of an average human, the scar there seemed to fade slightly, not disappearing, but looking older, as though it had been healing for years. This implied that future scars wouldn't vanish either. Increasing constitution would only make them appear healed. Even though I haven't ascended to rank 1 yet, with 3 times the constitution of an average human, my lifespan should be pretty long, right? Michael wondered. He was uncertain but felt he was on the right track. Awakeners had incredibly long lifespans. Rank 1 Awakeners could live up to 200 years, so what about the higher ranks? Beyond offering great power, the Land of Origin presented another alluring gift: immortality. Michael suspected that for many, immortality was the real prize. Power was just a desirable convenience. After adjusting to his enhanced constitution, Michael then allocated points to his agility stat. Agility 4.9. Compared to constitution, the effects of increasing agility were immediate. When Michael tried to move his hands, the newfound flexibility and speed made him stumble and almost flip himself over. Amazing! Though in an awkward position, his heart was filled with excitement. Boosting his agility felt like breaking free from invisible chains that had weighed him down. 4 times the average human speed. I'm practically a mini superhuman in the eyes of ordinary people now. And this is just level 2. When I advance to the first rank, the stat increase will be even more impressive. Michael was thrilled with his growth, eager to get even stronger. Now, he didn't fear acid slimes hurting him. He feared not finding any to fight. Before diving into exploring the abandoned building, though, he took a few minutes to adjust to his newfound agility. After testing his movement, he was stunned. The average human speed is about 100 meters in 10 seconds. I just tried running, and I'm hitting around 80 meters per second. And I think it's only this fast because I still need better control of my body. This is just the strength of an unranked awakener at level 2. No wonder only a few cultivators dared challenge the arrogant awakeners in the forums. But more than anything, Michael was overjoyed. He was lucky to have awakened. Like cultivators, before truly stepping into the supernatural path, awakeners below rank 1 were also referred to as apprentices, which even showed on their status panel. But considering his current strength, even a new rank 1 knight might not necessarily be as strong as he was now, right? Are cultivators really that weak? No, I can't think like that. Michael quickly scolded himself, sensing a hint of arrogance. That wasn't a good path, lest he become conceited. The waters of this world run deep. I'm not qualified to look down on anything yet. After calming down, Michael also recognized that his distribution of attribute points as a necromancer was clearly off. It was better to excel in one thing than to be mediocre in everything. But the issue was, he didn't have a choice. Right now, strength mattered most for leveling up, and more importantly, survival. As for necromancy, since he'd need to kill a monster first to have an undead summon, he could only hope that, if he did encounter one, it wouldn't be too strong. There's nothing I can do about it now. I'll leave it to fate. First, let's see if the slime dropped anything valuable. Excited, Michael made his way over to the corpse of the acid slime. As for the last attribute point, he decided to keep it in reserve for emergencies. Just like loot in games, the land of origin had its own version. The difference was that you couldn't simply touch a monster's corpse, shout loot, and watch materials burst out. While occasionally a monster corpse might burst out some loot, most of the time, the corpse itself was the loot, and you had to manually dismantle it to get what you wanted. However, there was one common type of loot that usually appeared from dead monsters. Unranked spirit crystal. I actually got a spirit crystal on my first kill, so lucky. Michael picked up the transparent crystal, which contained a bright, solidified liquid. Spirit crystals, said to be superior to mana crystals, the advanced version of mana stones, were highly valuable. They were materials that could only be found in abundance in the land of origin. Mana stones were cultivation resources that both cultivators and awakeners could use for their growth. A mana stone could increase cultivation speed by up to 3 times. This meant that using a mana stone for 1 month of cultivation was equivalent to 3 months of normal cultivation. The value of a mana stone was clear. Then there was the advanced version, the magic crystal, which could boost cultivation speed by up to 5 times. 5 times the cultivation speed meant that 1 month of cultivating with a mana crystal was equivalent to 5 months of normal cultivation. Given how valuable mana crystals were, just imagine the value of spirit crystals, which were placed above them. The two could hardly be compared. A spirit crystal could boost cultivation speed by up to 10 times. 10 times meant that 1 month of cultivation with a spirit crystal was almost a full year of normal cultivation. However, something as valuable as a spirit crystal was rare and in short supply. But what really excited Michael about the appearance of this spirit crystal wasn't because of its cultivation benefits. Like most awakeners, Michael wasn't too focused on the strength brought from cultivation. The real reason he was thrilled about the spirit crystal was its value. For someone like Michael, red-eyed with poverty, the money-making potential of being an awakener was a big motivation. One way he planned to make a profit was by selling loot to the Supers Association. As a common loot dropping from every 3 to 4 kills, or sometimes even less out of every 10 kills, Michael paid close attention after learning of its existence. In the Supers Association store, a mana stone was priced at $1,000, while a mana crystal sold for $5,000 due to its rarity and ease of absorption. Outside the association, these prices were even higher. A spirit crystal, thanks to its rarity and the pure, easily absorbed mana it contained, was valued at a whopping $20,000. $20,000. Though the selling price would differ from the store price, Michael estimated he could still get over $15,000 for it. It was clear why he was so thrilled with this find. To think I'd make my monthly allowance from the Supers Association on my first outing. Truly, being an awakener was a fast track to riches. Michael was pleased, but he grew a bit conflicted upon remembering another use for the spirit crystal. Aside from boosting cultivation speed, mana stones, mana crystals, and spirit crystals could also help recover exhausted mana, though this was often seen as wasteful. However, certain energies, like soul energy, couldn't be replenished by mana stones or crystals. He had seen some posts on the Supers Association forum mentioning souls, but the topic felt distant and complex. Michael figured such topics would be covered in an Awakener Academy, if he ever managed to get into one. Though Michael didn't think much about the topic of souls, he knew soul energy was tied to something he possessed, a talent. Talents were considered an advanced form of spells but were more powerful, as most skills couldn't match their capabilities. Talents didn't require mana to use. Instead, they needed soul energy, a resource no awakener could ever have enough of, making talents a sort of pseudo-trump card. Since soul energy wasn't the same as mana, It couldn't be restored by mana stones or crystals. If an awakener didn't want to wait for soul energy to recover slowly on its own, a spirit crystal could be used to replenish it. This made spirit crystals especially valuable to supernaturals who relied on soul energy, not just awakeners or talent holders. Michael had a talent, which was why he felt conflicted about using the spirit crystal, even though he'd never actually used his talent. Talents were powerful abilities, and though Michael tried not to be bothered by his current inability to access his, he couldn't shake a sense of discomfort. Would I be able to finally use my talent if I absorbed this spirit crystal? Michael was uncertain. This hesitation made him take a while to decide. Michael, look at the bigger picture. Money is good, but strength is better. If I can get one spirit crystal, I can get another. It's better to use this spirit crystal if there's even a chance of using my talent. With more strength, I'll be able to hunt more monsters and earn more spirit crystals. Gritting his teeth, Michael finally chose to absorb the spirit crystal. Author's note: apprentice cultivators can only passively absorb mana through breathing or meditation techniques, with the amount depending on their innate talents. They are unable to actively draw mana from resources like mana stones until they advance to official cultivator status. This limitation makes resources that accelerate cultivation for apprentice cultivators, with little to no side effects, highly valuable. However, mana stones, mana crystals, and spirit crystals are excluded from this category, as apprentice cultivators lack the ability to access the mana contained within them. Also, even after advancing to official cultivator status, apprentice cultivators are still referred to as apprentices, though now in a more formal capacity. Interestingly, those in the pre-advancement stage were originally called trainees, but this term has fallen out of use over time. After absorbing the spirit crystal, Michael didn't feel any immediate changes. It was when he checked his status to see his talent, he was finally able to see one. Talent Infinite Evolution. Evolution points 3. The evolution points increased. Michael's eyebrows raised slightly in surprise. There was still a bit more than an hour left since his awakening yesterday, meaning the daily evolution points would arrive soon, bringing his total to 4. Though I guess it's a good thing that the evolution points are increasing, but why haven't I felt any changes yet? Do these points need to accumulate to a certain level before I can use my talent? Michael speculated. He also had another suspicion about his talent. Maybe my talent is linked to my class for activation. From what I read on the forum, that's a common issue. Perhaps I need an undead summon first before I can use my talent. Michael sighed as he thought about it. He wanted an undead summon too. But unless he encountered another easy monster like the slime in this building, which he didn't think was likely, he couldn't do much. For now, he would just have to go with the flow. Maybe the Supers Association forum has a solution. I'll make sure to research it after I'm done here. Even though he had used the precious spirit crystal and still couldn't use his talent, Michael tried not to feel bad about it. At least he had gained something in return, even if it wasn't usable yet. Shifting his focus away from his talent, Michael turned to the other loot from the acid slime's corpse. It was the slime's core. The core was scattered a bit on the ground, likely from the shot that killed it. I don't know if this is worth anything, but I'll take it just in case. Not willing to throw anything potentially valuable away, Michael gathered the acid slime's core, which was about the size of a ping-pong ball, and placed it into his mark of origin. Afterward, he retraced his steps back to where he first encountered the slime, following the trail it had left behind. Michael did this to gather the bullet casings he had dropped, while trying to distance himself from the slime's acid shots. Unfortunately, some bullets had been destroyed by the acid slime during the chase, though a few managed to survive intact. Of course, Just because the casings were damaged didn't mean Michael was letting go of the intact bullets inside. Every bullet was worth money, and he wasn't about to be generous and leave them to nature. After gathering all the casings he had dropped, Michael returned to scanning his surroundings. At first, I wasn't sure, but after so many turns, I think this place might be a dormitory or at least a place where a large number of people once lived, judging by the large rooms and structure of the building. Michael was still unsure, as he had only explored a small part of the building and couldn't make an accurate guess yet. Let's keep exploring and see if there are any more monsters in this building. Hopefully, there'll be slimes, preferably nothing too freakish. It wasn't that Michael was afraid of other types of monsters. His experience told him that slimes were the only creatures he could handle in his current state. Only rabbits could come close. Had he been closer to civilization, he might have even received a quest to hunt such creatures. However, his starting point was far from any village or town, unlike some new awakeners. As for why he felt sure about only being able to handle slimes now, was because of his combat prowess. There was a reason guns became useless to awakeners after a while. The forums didn't explain it clearly, only hinting that monster skin grew thicker, or that they developed skills making projectiles like bullets ineffective. However, after raising some of his stats, particularly his constitution, Michael started to understand a little. Strength 1.6, Agility 4.9, Constitution 3.4, Intelligence 5.5, Attribute points 1. With nearly 4 times the constitution of an average human, Michael's enhanced constitution affected his health, endurance, and resistance to both physical and elemental damage, as well as environmental factors. He suspected that even a bullet shot at him might not cause serious harm. He might not even bleed due to the increased toughness of his skin. Just as a lighter wouldn't harm an average person, with his constitution now 3 times that of a typical human, Michael had reason to believe he'd be much harder to kill with ordinary weapons. If this was true for him, then what about monsters? Though attribute points gave awakeners a substantial, almost unfair advantage, just like a cheat, making them stronger than most monsters at the same level, there were still higher-level monsters that demanded caution. Some of these could have a constitution equal to or even greater than his, depending on their species, monster rank, and number of stars. Compared to those stronger monsters, creatures with relatively weak bodies, like acid slimes, were indeed the safer opponents for a newbie like him. Michael didn't dwell on these thoughts for long. Shortly after moving through the large building he suspected had once been a residential area, he encountered his second monster. However, he was conflicted by the sight in front of him. Should I be happy or not? Acid Slime LV 7. Rank Common. A harmless-looking slime that shoots acid. Just as Michael had hoped, he encountered another monster. It was another slime, just as he wished. However, this slime had a higher level than him. While awakeners shouldn't be judged solely by their level, thanks to attribute points, there's a reason the saying, "fight according to your level," exists. Although a level 7 acid slime didn't necessarily mean it would be much harder to kill, due to a slime's naturally weak constitution, its acid would likely be more potent than the previous one. However, with my current constitution and speed, could I actually take on this slime head-on? Michael wondered. Monsters didn't have attribute points like awakeners, so any increase they got as they leveled up was purely based on their race. If Michael relied solely on the stat increases, his human race naturally provided 0.2 in all stats and 0.5 in intelligence per level. He'd only gain 1.8 in strength, agility, and constitution, and 4.5 in intelligence by level 10. He'd be stronger than other humans, but nowhere near as powerful as he was now with his attribute points. This was why attribute points felt like cheats. With attribute points, even a level 7 monster shouldn't be too tough for Michael if he planned well. For the acid slime, avoiding its acid shots would lower the danger significantly. Of course, Michael only considered this. Until his gun proved ineffective, he preferred long-range combat with monsters. It wasn't that he lacked close combat skills. By the time students left high school in the real world, most had basic combat training, due to the combat-oriented nature of awakener and cultivator professions they could potentially have in the future. Though he wasn't the top in his class, Michael had learned some close combat skills, but knowing how to fight didn't mean he could automatically apply it well in a real encounter. Michael stared at the acid slime, about 20 meters away and slowly crawling further. If it had been farther, his detect skill wouldn't have worked, as unranked awakeners could only use it within such a limited range. I wonder if basic shot will be effective at this distance, Michael thought, uncertain. Unlike detect, which was arguably unique, other skills, even class skills, had clear limitations and mastery levels. Detect had its own limitations, but notably it didn't have a mastery level. Unlike other skills, which started from basic mastery or class skills from intermediate mastery, detect had no mastery rank. One unique feature was that, like a talent, it didn't use mana, yet unlike talents, it also didn't require soul energy. The only valuable information he found in his research was that detect could be considered a passive skill, a rare type that required no mana to activate and functioned constantly. Active skills, in contrast, needed to be manually activated using energy. Yet despite this classification, detect still didn't quite feel like a typical passive skill. Michael was intrigued by the nature of the detect skill, but when he searched the forums, he found only basic information, with no mention of its unique properties. His first thought was that this was due to his authority level in the Supers Association, which was only level 1. If detect required a higher authority to learn more about, it confirmed its unique nature. Perhaps, he thought, it might even have something to do with the uniqueness of the land of origin itself, rather than just the skill's effects. Other skills, however, were generally more straightforward once one became familiar with them. Most skills didn't mean immediate effect upon activation. Just because an awakener had the fireball skill, for instance, didn't mean a fireball would instantly appear upon activation. Instead, activating a skill provided the caster with knowledge and an instinctual feel for its workings, making it easier to use. The higher the skill's mastery, the deeper the knowledge and ease of use. Take basic shot, the skill Michael acquired. Activating it wouldn't immediately fire a bullet. Instead, it would instinctively guide him on how to hold the gun, aim, and shoot, an improvement over his earlier, more random attempts. As his mastery improves, the more the skill would feel like second nature to him. As thoughts raced through Michael's mind, he raised his gun, aiming at the distant acid slime. Michael quietly activated his skill. Basic shot. Immediately, he felt an instinctive awareness. His grip was wrong, his aim was off, his posture needed adjusting. Step by step, Michael made each correction, guided by the skill's influence, while keeping his focus on the unaware slime in the distance. Despite the skill's assistance, it took Michael about 20 seconds to make these adjustments. He could still sense more room for improvement, a result of his low mastery of basic shot. With higher mastery, aiming and shooting would feel like second nature. He'd be faster, more precise, without needing to think. The miraculous effect of his skill left Michael speechless. For the first time, handling a gun felt natural. Though the skill hints I could improve even further, this is already leagues beyond my earlier fumbling. All I need is to raise my skills proficiency and mastery. No wonder the Federation wants awakeners. We really are like cheats, quick power-ups, instantly mastering skills that should take years to learn. As a necromancer, if I were an archer, wouldn't I already be a sharpshooter? How can ordinary people compete with this? Sure, both are powerful, but the teachers were really wrong to say awakeners and cultivators were equal. It's not surprising, though, since the world barely understands these two professions in the first place. Is this a deliberate concealment by the Federation, or is there a bigger picture here? Despite the whirlwind of thoughts, Michael's focus never wavered from the acid slime. As soon as he locked onto the monster with a steady aim, he pulled the trigger without hesitation. Bang! A soft sound echoed through the long hall. The gunshot wasn't loud, thanks to the silencer. Pui! Unlike his first encounter with an acid slime, where he missed every shot, this time Michael's first bullet struck true. It didn't kill the slime, but the hole close to its core showed it was a near hit. Basic shot is so powerful, Michael praised in his mind as he began to retreat. Though close, the shot hadn't reached the core, and now the slime was aware of him. No eyes or ears, yet it still senses truly a freak of nature, Michael thought, revealing his dislike for slimes. But it's slow. Even though monsters didn't have attribute points, Michael expected the level 7 acid slime to be stronger. However, aside from the intensity and range of its acid attacks, its speed was barely different from the last one. If it's this slow, then there's nothing to fear. This didn't mean Michael would be reckless. Despite his increasing confidence, Michael knew little about slimes and their potential abilities. However, seeing the slime's slow pace, Michael figured could potentially finish it off with his refined spear from the Supers Association store. But Michael decided against it. For now, the slime couldn't reach him, while he could still land shots from a safe distance. With this strategy, he could continue leveling up until his bullets ran out or his gun became ineffective. Then, he'd consider close combat. After circling around, following his previous path back to the room he'd first arrived in, avoiding unexplored areas to prevent running into more monsters, Michael finally managed to bring down the acid slime. You killed a common LV7 acid slime. You've gained 103 experience points. You killed a monster 5 levels higher than your own, earning a 6x experience multiplier. You've gained 618 experience points. Level up. You have leveled up to level 3. Level up. You have leveled up to level 4. You've leveled up to level 4 human. You've gained 0.4 stat points in strength, agility, and constitution. You've gained 1 stat points in intelligence. You have gained 4 attribute points. You've leveled up to level 4 Necromancer Apprentice. You've gained 0.2 stat points in strength and constitution, 0.6 stat points in agility, and 1 stat points in intelligence. You have gained 8 attribute points. After the acid slime died, Michael felt a surge of power flood through him. His mind sharpened, his strength increased, his defense tightened, and his speed quickened. I leveled up, Michael thought happily. Unlike the previous level up, where he only felt pain, this time he could clearly sense the changes that came with leveling up. And since he leveled up twice in a row, the boost in strength was even more pronounced. Excited, Michael immediately checked his status to see the results. Status: Name: Michael Norman. Class: Necromancer Apprentice. Level 42. Exp 48600. Strength 2206. Agility 5910. Constitution 4006. Intelligence 7520. Attribute points 13. Skills: Undead Summoning, Undead Revival, Detect, Basic Shot. Talent Infinite Evolution. Class Skill Contract Slot 0/8. Gift Mark of Origin. Seeing his newly updated status, Michael felt a surge of emotion. In just a little over an hour in the land of origin, he had transformed into someone monstrous by human standards. What thrilled Michael most was the increase in his attribute points, the foundation of his power. The sight of 13 attribute points filled him with joy. 13 attribute points. Including the one I saved from my previous level up, I gained 6 from leveling up to level 3 and another 6 from reaching level 4. Should I use them now? Michael was a bit conflicted, like having a sudden windfall without knowing where to spend it, even though the possibilities were endless. Considering how he might leverage these points for another power boost, Michael paid attention to his stats. My strength is now twice that of an average human. Even though it's my weakest stat, it's still very strong. For now, I don't need to increase it since I haven't felt the need. Strength wasn't a priority for a necromancer, but without any undead under his command, Michael was still essentially operating as a fake one. Then there was his agility. It increased by an entire point, bringing my agility to nearly 6 times that of an average human. I'm probably not inferior in speed to most level 8-10 monsters, unless they're specialized in agility. Michael felt confident in his assessment. Since monsters lacked attribute points and relied solely on their race for stat boosts, even a level 5 monster specialized in speed might barely edge him out in agility, if at all. For one, I haven't seen any monsters other than slimes in this building. For now, I don't need to increase my speed since it's already sufficient, Michael thought, moving on to the next stat, his constitution. Without hesitation, he added 1 point to his constitution, raising it to 5 times that of an average human. The reasoning was simple. More vitality meant he'd be harder to kill. Plus, seeing his attribute points at even numbers was visually satisfying. There wasn't much to say about his intelligence stat. For now, it remained largely useless. One intriguing aspect of stats was that, when a stat related to one's class reached increments of 20 points, there was a 50% chance of gaining a new skill. Sometimes, one could even gain skills related to other, unrelated stats for every 20-point increase. However, a 50% chance didn't guarantee a skill every 40 points. One could potentially accumulate 100 points in a stat without receiving any skill. With his 13 attribute points, Michael could have invested in intelligence to try unlocking a skill, but it would be a risky gamble. If he failed, there'd be no undoing it. Even though Necromancer awakens are rare. I doubt I'm the first whose starting location has made it inconvenient to have an undead. There should be a solution on the Supers Association forum. I'll check it out once I'm back. Ultimately, Michael decided to save his attribute points for later when he'd truly need them. His current strength was already sufficient. Closing his panel, he approached the corpse of the acid slime. Unfortunately, the only loot he found was the acid slime core, no spirit crystal this time. Michael wasn't too disappointed. He'd anticipated it. If spirit crystals were common, they wouldn't be so precious. Stashing the acid slime core in his mark of origin, Michael set off in search of more monsters, 2 hours later. After thoroughly searching the abandoned building, Michael managed to kill 13 more slimes and leveled up. Unfortunately, even with this number, the experience he gained wasn't enough to raise his level by more than 1. As his level increased, it began to match that of the slimes in the building. The extra bonus experience points he earned from defeating higher-level monsters had little impact, as the strongest slime he encountered was only level 7. Most of the slimes Michael fought ranged from level 4 to level 5. Still, Michael wasn't discouraged. At least he wasn't in significant danger while leveling up. It was well known that as one's level increased, it became progressively harder to advance. There were two main reasons for this. One, the risk factor. Fighting stronger monsters carried greater risks. Most awakeners avoided recklessly endangering their lives and instead preferred steady, gradual growth. After all, they had time and no inherent bottlenecks. Sooner or later, their accumulated experience would lead to leveling up. 2. Scaling challenges. As awakeners grew stronger, so did the monsters. The advantage provided by attribute points diminished over time. For instance, common-grade monsters could only reach a maximum of level 21 with 3 stars. Any monster that could reach above level 21 was a rare-grade monster species, and the difficulty only escalated as their levels increased. While attribute points could allow awakeners to compete with rare-grade monsters, they became insufficient against higher-grade foes. Of course, none of this had much relevance to Michael at the moment. He was satisfied that he had managed to reach level 5. The slimes also provided him with 4 spirit crystals and a good haul of slime cores. But these weren't his greatest gains. After killing the final slime, Michael finally discovered the exit to the building he was trapped in. The exit was wide open, revealing more abandoned buildings in the distance. Some of these structures had partially crumbled into dust, while others were overgrown with thick grass. Roots sprouted from the walls, similar to the building Michael was currently in. It was clear these buildings had been abandoned for a long time. Despite the temptation to leave, Michael didn't take a single step toward the exit. No, he didn't even dare approach it. Outside the exit was a staircase, and at the base of it stood a statue that blended seamlessly with the environment. If not for his caution and curiosity prompting him to use Detect on the statue, Michael might have overlooked its peculiarity. No, more likely, he would have died. Gargoyle LV 21. Rank Rare. An old gargoyle, weakened after years of neglect. A gargoyle, a creature once thought to exist only in fiction back in his previous world, now stood just 20 meters away from him. However, this one was wingless, but that was the least of Michael's concerns. I'm cooked, he thought bitterly. His experience in the land of origin seemed cursed enough to rank among the top 100 most unfortunate starts for new awakeners this year. First, he nearly died to a slime, and now it turned out the slimes were merely appetizers for the main course. Trapped in what he assumed was an abandoned dormitory, Michael's options were limited. He considered making the holes in the roof bigger and climbing his way out. With his current strength, he could likely jump high enough to reach the roof. But this plan had its risks. For one, the noise could attract attention. Perhaps the gargoyle outside had noticed him, but refrained from attacking because he was already inside the building it guarded. Even if he escaped unnoticed, what guarantee did he have that there weren't other monsters, possibly even stronger ones, lurking nearby? A rank 1, level 11 monster like the gargoyle was already far beyond him. Adding more threats to the mix wasn't a gamble he wanted to take. I want my slimes back. Michael wanted to scream in frustration but held back, mindful of the gargoyle outside the building. Though he suspected the gargoyle might not come after him, he'd been in this building for hours, occasionally making noise. It wasn't a risk worth taking. Despite the dire situation, Michael wasn't in complete despair. At least he was still alive, and as long as that remained true, he could devise a way out. As thoughts raced through his mind, Michael made his way back to the spot where he'd first appeared. For some reason, this location always gave him a faint sense of comfort and security. Time to go back home. After several hours of running around, even though he was much stronger now, Michael was both physically and mentally drained. He carefully scanned his surroundings, ensuring no threats lurked nearby that could ambush his defenseless body. Only then did he sit down in a corner, taking out an energy nutrient from the Supers Association store. It tastes awful, but at least you won't starve, buddy," he muttered, patting himself as he swallowed the bitter liquid. Time to go back and look for solutions to my unwanted problems. Once ready, Michael disconnected his consciousness from the land of origin. Back in Aurora, his eyes slowly opened. The F***CK. Author's note. Good day, beautiful readers. Yes, I'm talking to you. Hee hee. This marks the end of Volume 1 for evolving my Undead Legion in a game-like world. Over the past 20 chapters, I've worked hard to establish a solid foundation for both worlds, the mechanics, and the main character. Starting from Volume 2, the story picks up pace as we dive deeper into the main plotlines. Michael will gain explosive strength and finally gets to use his talent while preparing for the Awakens Academy exams. Thank you so much for making it this far. I hope you'll continue this journey with me. I have so much in store for all of us. Also, please share your thoughts about Volume 1. What could have been done better, what you liked or disliked, and what you're looking forward to in Volume 2. Michael felt conflicted about his first day in the land of origin. On one hand, it had been exciting. He had narrowly survived being killed by a slime, escaping disfigurement by sheer luck. On the other hand, it was downright terrible. His first battle had been a life-and-death struggle against one of the weakest species, a slime, and just as things seemed to improve, he encountered an even bigger boss. "Is this what they mean by being at the gate of heaven yet unable to enter?" he muttered, still lying on his bed, staring at the ceiling in silence. But despite the chaos, Michael couldn't deny one thing. However, it wasn't like there weren't any gains. Though his first experience in the other world left much to be desired, it gave him what he sought: strength. Status: Name: Michael Norman. Class: Necromancer Apprentice. Level 5-4. Exp: 114,800. Strength 2,512. Agility 6,450. Constitution 4,331. Intelligence 8,540. Attribute points 18. Skills: Undead Summoning, Undead Revival, Detect New, Basic Shot New. Talent: Infinite Evolution. Class Skill: Contract Slot 0/10. Gift: Mark of Origin. Michael had only been in the land of origin for about 3 hours, yet compared to yesterday, when he first awakened, his growth was astonishing. Those seniors on the forum were so right. The land of origin is no game, even though it looks like one, but it's truly an amazing place, he muttered in awe. A second later, his mood dipped into depression. Yet, even with all this growth, I still don't have any undead as a necromancer. My supposed highest stat, intelligence, is about to be overtaken by agility. Am I really a necromancer, or am I becoming an assassin instead? Pausing, he chuckled bitterly. No, scratch that. I should be an archer. My only working skill is basic shot, and it doesn't even use mana. It's a physical skill fueled by stamina. Michael mockingly shook his head in helplessness as he stood and stretched his stiff muscles. Afterward, he grabbed his phone from the desk. 307, he read. That's roughly 3 hours spent in the land of origin. I left here a little after noon. And it was approaching noon there before I left. Aurora's time is probably 3 to 4 hours ahead. Of course, the time zones of Aurora and the land of origin were unrelated, being completely different worlds. Still, Michael used the time difference as an estimate. With that thought lingering, Michael sat in the chair by his desk and logged into the Supers Association forum on his phone. This time he wasn't just searching for answers. He planned to ask directly. Michael had too many uncertainties, and searching blindly for solutions, without even knowing the right terms, felt like trying to find a rumored treasure in the middle of an ocean. Conflicting first day in the land of origin. Michael began by detailing his experiences, his initial location, the eerie ruins, and how, as a necromancer, his environment didn't offer any way to have an undead. He also explained the challenge posed by the rank 1 monster blocking his path and sought advice on what to do next. The Supers Association reportedly had over 70,000 awakeners. Though Michael wasn't sure how many were online, the forum currently showed 10,000 active users. Surely, among them, someone, awakener or even cultivator, would have advice for his predicament. As Michael waited for his post to be verified, he browsed the forum to pass the time. He had barely reached the homepage when a trending topic caught his attention. Changes in the Federation. Huh, what's this? Michael muttered, intrigued. Changes in the Federation, he repeated thoughtfully, recalling something he had pondered back in the land of origin. The Federation's focus on awakeners had always seemed odd to him. Most people, especially younger generations, only knew that the Federation valued awakeners. The exact reasons remained unclear. They were also made to believe that cultivators were comparable to awakeners, with the primary distinction being cultivation speed. However, as a new awakener, Michael already knew this was inaccurate. He didn't claim to be an expert on cultivators, but access to the forum had expanded his understanding. For instance, a rank 2 Knight Elite, supposedly 10 times stronger than the average human, could easily be matched by a level 5 awakener who hadn't even advanced yet. In his view, cultivators were barely comparable to awakeners if they refrained from using attribute points. This was an undeniable gap, yet the public was deliberately led to believe otherwise. Michael suspected this misinformation served a purpose. Perhaps it was to prevent despair among those who failed to awaken, or maybe it aimed to avoid creating an intense social divide between awakeners and cultivators. This social divide was evident on the forum, but in the real world, most people likely saw awakeners and cultivators as only slightly different, both possessing great powers but nothing vastly superior. All of this seemed suspicious, and Michael felt certain only the Federation knew the truth. Now, staring at the trending topic, curiosity got the better of him. He tapped the post. The post's author was a level 2 member of the Supers Association, 1 rank above Michael. It had also been published just a day ago, taking that time to gain enough traction to trend on the forum. Changes in the Federation. Name: Billy Storman. Level 2. Date published: Thursday, 18th of the 7th month, year 228 of the new era, 1 day ago. I'm a mage commander studying at the Moonstone Cultivation Academy. A week ago, I returned home for vacation. Normally, when the academy grants a break to prepare for incoming college exams, we older students usually choose one of 2 options: spend some time with our families before resuming training or head straight to the dimensional cracks for training. However, this post isn't about that. Since I have 3 months of vacation, I decided to spend some of it with my family, given I missed the opportunity last year. But to my surprise, when I got home, I noticed something strange. Whenever I come back, my younger siblings typically ask me ignorant questions about awakeners and cultivators. This time, however, they seemed to know more than I did before entering the academy. At first, I worried they had been dabbling in illegal channels to access classified information, but I quickly learned that their school had started teaching them this new knowledge. Curious, I asked some of my schoolmates who also went home for the break. They reported similar changes in their sibling schools, though it seemed this was happening mainly in big cities, for now. I'm confused. Wasn't the Federation the one restricting information about supernatural professions, especially for children? Why are they suddenly releasing it now? If you check iTube, you'll find videos containing information we couldn't access in high school. I'm not personally affected, but I'm curious. Does anyone know what's going on? After reading the post, Michael's heart grew slightly heavy. The content of the post touched on something he had considered before. Seeing that others seemed to share his suspicions, or at least that his doubts were partially validated, left Michael deep in thought. Even the mention of the Moonstone Cultivation Academy, the first time he had encountered the name of a supernatural institute, failed to hold much of Michael's attention. In a way, this highlighted how severely information about the supernatural had been suppressed in this world. For students who began cultivating at a young age, to remain unaware of the names of colleges they could potentially attend was telling. This kind of reminds me of those cultivation novels I read back on Earth, Michael thought. In those worlds, mortals knew of the existence of immortals, but anything beyond that was treated as forbidden or rare knowledge. The Federation has been suppressing information about awakeners and cultivators for so long, so why are they changing now? As a transmigrator, Michael had spent some time reflecting on the nature of this world, despite having been here for just over 3 weeks. Since his awakening, Michael had often wondered. Awakeners and cultivators were supposedly respected members of society, yet strangely little was known about them or their way of life. Occasionally there were glimpses, videos for instance, but even those were superficial. From Michael's current perspective, they appeared designed to mislead the public rather than inform them. The information taught in schools about awakeners and cultivators was even more lacking than he initially imagined. What was provided was the barest minimum, and while it might have seemed like a lot to the former Michael, the awakened Michael now saw how insignificant it truly was. If Michael had transmigrated as an adult without memories of this world, he might have initially thought it was simply a technologically advanced version of Earth. This realization underscored how, despite being a driving force in society, awakeners and cultivators were almost invisible. Perhaps this felt normal to most people in this world, since it had always been this way for them. However, as a transmigrator, Michael's perspective was different. Initially, he hadn't bothered much about the situation, since he wasn't even sure if he'd be able to awaken a class. If he had failed to awaken, and the Federation continued the way it did, the Federation's suppression of information would have ensured he remained ignorant about the supernatural, just like the majority of citizens. This was why the post he had just read struck Michael so deeply. He had 2 pressing questions. 1. Why had information about awakeners and cultivators been suppressed for so long? 2. Why was information being released now? What is happening in the Federation? As several thoughts flashed through Michael's mind, he scrolled to the comment section under the post. I knew something like this was going to happen sooner or later. Though I get the Federation's point of view due to the tragic events of the past, they need to remember that they're raising humans, people, not animals in a cage. Those dogs have been in power for so long that it's gone to their heads. I agree with Senior's words, though I wouldn't dare to be as blunt, haha. New cultivator here. What were the tragic events that happened in the past? Are they the reason the Federation suppresses news about us? One particular comment caught Michael's attention. First, it was the audacity of the writer that stood out, though Michael decided to wisely ignore it, as it came from a level 5 member. Second, it was the content that truly intrigued him. Tragic events. What events could have possibly made the Federation so determined to suppress news about us? Curious, Michael continued reading the thread with heightened focus. After the new cultivator asked for guidance, another level 5 member stepped in to reply. Before I answer, let me ask you this. What happens when you put poor and rich people together in the same space? A social structure forms, Senior. This social structure, who does it benefit? The rich, Senior. Exactly. To put it simply, the rich oppress the poor, directly or indirectly, and this is for something as mundane as wealth. Now, what do you think happens when you put people with supernatural powers alongside ordinary humans who depend on them to survive? Back in the Dark Ages, a year after the dimensional cracks appeared and unleashed monsters, humanity's population plummeted to just 100 million. This and a few other things are what the kids nowadays are aware of. In truth, they know nothing at all. It was at the point of close extinction hope came. The arrival of awakeners gave humanity a fighting chance, and years later the cultivators followed. This was the turning point when humans began to fight back. During those desperate times, survival was the priority, and there was little concern for status. However, as the situation improved, things changed. Ordinary humans idolized the supernaturals, and the supernaturals began to see themselves as superior. This mindset grew stronger as humanity stabilized. Awakeners and cultivators began treating ordinary humans as lesser beings, and ordinary humans, in turn, accepted this dynamic. It wasn't uncommon back then for a cultivator to kill an ordinary human out of anger, and both sides would see it as normal. Over time, things worsened. Some supernaturals turned into demonic beings, demonic cultivators or awakeners. One powerful mage once sacrificed 1,000,000 lives, and that was among the lesser tragedies. Others committed far worse atrocities. Oh, you might curse those demonic supernaturals, but remember, before they fell to darkness, they were once humans too. Even you can't deny that, with your powers, you've started to see yourself as superior to others. Reading this made Michael's heart heavy. The senior was right. Slowly but surely, he had begun to see himself as superior, not to humans but to cultivators. Yet, if he viewed himself as above cultivators, who were already higher than ordinary humans, wasn't he essentially agreeing that ordinary people were beneath him? With a heavy heart, Michael continued reading. He now knew what the previous Level 5 member meant by tragic events of the past. Yet, this still didn't fully explain why the Federation suppressed knowledge about awakeners and cultivators. When demonic cultivators grew more rampant, the powerful figures in the government stepped in to suppress them. But here's the brutal truth. We are indeed superior to ordinary humans. Denying this would be hypocrisy. And because of this superiority, the Federation decided to prevent another crisis by isolating ordinary humans from supernatural matters while creating a separate space for us. They suppressed news about supernatural's powers so ordinary people wouldn't realize the vast difference between them and subconsciously consider themselves inferior, just as in the Dark Ages. At the same time, they worked to redirect supernatural's focus away from meddling in ordinary people's lives. This led to the creation of two worlds, one for supernaturals and another for ordinary humans. Even cultivator trainees below college level are taught only how to cultivate, with martial discipline imposed on them much like ordinary humans. This created a sense of equality, and the method worked for decades, preventing the rise of demonic supernaturals. But alas, it also made us weaker as a whole. Billy Storman, thanks for answering, seniors. We were taught about this in school, but I'm still confused. How does suppressing information about us make us weaker overall? And what does this have to do with the Federation releasing bits of information now? After reading the senior Level 5 member's words, Michael fell into deep thought. It was only after a while that he snapped out of it. Demonic awakeners and cultivators, the Dark Age, and the Federation's actions. I'm truly ignorant of the world I'm in. Michael's heart felt heavy. The senior's words revealed that he was surrounded by a fog of ignorance. Fortunately, as an awakener, he could slowly clear this fog and learn more about the truth of the world. Turning his attention back to the comments, Michael couldn't help but reflect. Though we were taught about the Dark Age in school, it was definitely not as revealing as this. The saying that history is written by the victors is true. Who knows how much of what we were taught as history is actually the truth? The more he discovered about the public's ignorance of the world they lived in, the heavier his heart grew. To some extent, he could relate to the senior's frustration. While he understood the Federation's desire to avoid creating an obvious social structure between supernaturals and ordinary humans, it also felt like they were treating humans like livestock. This realization left Michael conflicted. The Federation, which once seemed like the good guys, now felt much more ambiguous. Demonic cultivators, the senior said they were suppressed, not eradicated. Could they still exist somewhere in this world? The sense of security Michael once felt in the real world began to crumble. The waters of this world are indeed too deep. Aside from this revelation, Michael felt an even greater need to become stronger. My greatest strength is my class, so I can't leave the matter of undead unattended for long. My leveling speed is still too slow, and then there's the college exams to prepare for. Though I question the authenticity of these institutions after learning about the Federation's actions, Billy's comment under the senior's post shows there's still much to learn from them. But compared to my peers who awakened 2 years ago, and even those who awakened last year, I'm far behind. With only 3 months of preparation, there's little to no time. Michael clenched his fists, determination welling up within him. I must get stronger. As several thoughts flashed through Michael's mind, he turned his attention back to the comment section. There was something the senior had said that left him confused. We're weaker overall. Thankfully, Billy, the author of the post, had asked the same question, and another individual, though not a level 5 member this time but a level 3, responded. Saying we're weak overall, what the senior meant is that the public no longer has a strong drive for strength. You might think they do, but they don't. What happens in a world where the poor don't feel much different from the rich? Will they strive for wealth as a goal, or simply for convenience? I've visited the martial arts cultivator world before, and the commoners there are deeply oppressed by those in power. But compared to people in our world, those so-called commoners hunger for power with an intensity that moved me. Unlike here, where an 18-year-old who has failed their awakening will give up on gaining strength and settle for getting by in society. I agree with the senior. If the public truly knew the extent of awakeners and cultivators' power and felt it, they'd hunger for it. That hunger would, in turn, boost our national strength. But in recent years, the number of new cultivators has been steadily declining. Perhaps the Federation can no longer ignore this and is being forced to take action, reminding the public of the supernatural elements available in their world. Our world is not as safe as the public believes. You, as a student of an academy, should know this better than anyone. Use every moment to grow stronger for yourself, your loved ones, and our people. May the will of Aurora prevail for 1,000,000 years. Billy Storman, thank you for your advice. May the will of Aurora prevail for 1,000,000 years. May the will of Aurora prevail for 1,000,000 years. The sentence felt like a slogan, stirring something deep within Michael. Even the revelation of the level 3 member traveling to another world didn't catch much of his attention. In school, they were taught that some dimensional cracks from the Dark Age still remained. While most led to places filled with monsters, a few opened gateways to other realms like Aurora. They had also been told that these monsters were a significant reason why cultivators and awakeners were vital to society. Yet, the seriousness of it all had eluded him back then, as the topic was presented in a light, almost casual manner. Even combat classes felt more like physical education than actual preparation for life-threatening situations. Reading the comment section under Billy's post, however, shattered that illusion. Michael realized that reality was far harsher than what they were taught. Aurora wasn't safe. Whether the threat came from monsters, demonic supernaturals, or something else entirely, he didn't know. But one thing was clear, he needed strength. Whatever the Federation's motives were for gradually unveiling the truth to the public, Michael understood that he had to be ready for whatever followed. He tried to dig deeper into the comments, hoping to find more insights about the Federation's actions, but nothing else was as informative as the comments from the seniors. Most were either empty speculations or cheap imitations of what had already been said. Realizing he wouldn't find anything more useful, Michael dismissed the post. Curious about the truth of the world he lived in, Michael began searching for topics he had never considered before. His first search focused on the Dark Age, but the information available mirrored what he had been taught in school. However, when he searched for demonic supernaturals, he discovered new insights. Thankfully, his Level 1 membership granted him access to this information. For one, his suspicion that demonic supernaturals still existed was confirmed. Michael learned that both the Federation and students from Cultivation and Awakener academies occasionally hunted them. However, details about their recent actions or larger operations remained inaccessible to him. Still, knowing they were still a threat made his heart grow heavier. Next, Michael delved into dimensional cracks. Beyond the simplified descriptions given in school, where they were portrayed as harmless as neighboring countries, he discovered that the reality was much grimmer. It wasn't the monster-filled cracks that posed the greatest danger to Aurora, but those leading to other realms. These cracks introduced him to a new term: invader invasions. Michael learned that some civilizations on the other side of these cracks sought to expand their control over Aurora, resulting in ongoing wars. This revelation shocked him. Despite the end of the Dark Age, Aurora was far from safe. The public's ignorance was protected by the sacrifices of others, who fought wars that few could properly appreciate. Unfortunately, Michael's low authority level once again restricted his access to more information. Still, he gleaned enough to know that Academy students like himself were regarded as reserve soldiers for the Federation, tasked with defending Aurora from both internal and external threats alongside the military. Having frequently encountered references to supernatural academies in his searches, Michael made them his next research topic. In a few minutes, he learned more about his world than he had in all his years at school. This world isn't safe. I need strength to protect myself and my family. The Federation seems to have reached a dead end. I can only rely on myself. In the end, it all comes down to strength. With strength, the road ahead will be clearer. But even now, there are things I can and must do. Michael listed his priorities. First, I need to start fully utilizing my class advantages. Necromancers are known for having one of the fastest leveling speeds, as they earn a percentage of the experience from enemies killed by their summons. My class is also one of the strongest, capable of functioning as a one-man army, much like a beast tamer in the later stages. Wasting this potential would be foolish. Having an undead could also be the turning point for me to finally make use of my talent. I really hope it is. Then there's the college exam. With my current strength, getting into a top Awakener academy is a pipe dream. Only cultivation academies might accept me due to my identity as an Awakener, but since this directly impacts my growth and access to information, I have to take it seriously. Lastly, I need to find a solution for the ruins I'm trapped in within the land of origin. If I don't, my growth will be even slower. After setting these goals, Michael finally turned his attention to his present situation. The Super Association system had notified him minutes ago that his post was approved, but he had been too engrossed in his research to check it. He hadn't expected immediate responses anyway and decided to wait. Returning to his post, Michael was shocked to find it had garnered over 30 comments and a surprising amount of traction, more than 30,000 views in just half an hour. The unexpected popularity stunned him. I hope I can find something useful, Michael muttered as he opened the comments section, only to be taken aback again. To his surprise, nearly no one seemed concerned about his struggles as a necromancer. Instead, the majority were fixated on his initial location, ignoring the topic of his post entirely. I don't know if I should call you lucky or unlucky. Lucky because you somehow stumbled into a ruin every awakener prays for, and unlucky because you're too weak to explore it, stopped by a mere level 21 monster. A level 21 monster weak. Oi, that's a rank 1 monster close to the limit, Michael thought, feeling both attacked and embarrassed. Despite the sting, the comment made him pause. Ruins. Michael had read novels back on Earth where such places brimmed with treasures, but back in the land of origin, he hadn't been thinking about ruins. His focus had been on scouring dorm rooms for mist slimes, not the ancient significance of his surroundings. Curious, Michael continued reading other comments. Gargoyles are artificially created monsters, so it's almost certain you're in a ruin. As 3-star rare-grade monsters, their weakest are usually around level 20. Given your description of the ruin, it's clearly very old. Gargoyles don't lose levels even after 50 years, so the ruin you're in is at least 200 years old. The older the ruin, the more valuable its treasures. I'd say you're lucky, kid. Just don't die there before enhancing your strength by leveling up in real life. This comment, far more informative, caught Michael's attention. Checking the commenter's profile, he saw they were a level 4 member. Michael's curiosity deepened. He had recently searched for the meaning behind the Super Association's member levels and now understood their significance. Level 1 members, unranked to rank 1 awakeners and rank 1-2 cultivators, apprentice and elite. Level 2 members, rank 2 awakeners and rank 3-4 cultivators, commander and master. Level 3 members, rank 3 awakeners and rank 5 cultivators, king level. Level 4 members, rank 4 awakeners and rank 6 cultivators, emperor level. Level 5 members, rank 5 awakeners and rank 7 cultivators, demigod level. Realizing this, Michael felt a newfound respect for the seniors in the forum. Those level 5 members were akin to demigods in strength. They truly deserved to be addressed with such reverence. With his current power, Michael couldn't even begin to fathom the strength of a being addressed as a demigod. He also noticed a distinct pattern. Starting from rank 5 in the cultivation power system, king level, the gap between awakeners and cultivators began to narrow. An awakener rank was no longer comparable to 2 cultivator ranks, at least on the surface. Perhaps cultivators experienced a significant boost at king level, but Michael wasn't worried. Awakeners wouldn't stagnate either. They grew stronger with each rank advancement. Of course, a king-level cultivator was still far beyond Michael's reach and deserving of respect. The awakener who responded to his post was a level 4 member, making them comparable to an emperor-level cultivator, just below the demigod rank. As an awakener, they might even stand a chance against a demigod. It was clear this level 4 member was a senior as well. Michael hurriedly gave his thanks. Fortunately, I wasn't desperate enough to do something reckless. I might have missed this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Michael thought. Dying in the land of origin came with heavy consequences. Not only did one lose 10% of their stats permanently, but their location also changed. If Michael died in the ruin, he could kiss it goodbye. The senior's advice also reminded him of something he'd read earlier about dimensional cracks. These cracks were under Federation supervision, and gaining access required either Super's Association membership or Academy enrollment. While Michael wasn't an Academy student, his Super's Association membership granted him access to cracks within his member level's limit. This realization gave him hope. Now that he had clarity on his location, Michael shifted focus to the next issue. Fortunately, someone among these ruin-obsessed awakeners remembered I'm a necromancer in distress. Bro, fellow undead user here, haha. Funny thing is, I ended up in a situation just like yours, stuck in a location where I couldn't even get an undead. It was near the outskirts of a kingdom's capital, right where the headquarters of a massive religion and their pope reside. I'd have been deader than dead if I tried summoning an undead there. Honestly, your situation isn't that bad. Just head to the Supers Association and buy a monster corpse. It's not even that expensive. The cheapest ones go for about 3,000 at least, so it's pretty affordable. Since I had the funds, I bought several level 10 monster corpses, haha. You can also check out the monster breeding centers in your area, but they usually sell corpses for way more than the Supers Association does. Michael checked the name of the commenter. Liaveni Lorenzio. The name was quite fancy. Liaveni was also a level 1 member, just like Michael. From the tone and first sentence of Liaveni's comment, Michael deduced this bro was likely a peer, a fellow new awakener. Whether this bro was 16, 17, or perhaps even his exact age was unknown to Michael, though he couldn't care less. What mattered most was the comment's helpfulness. "Why didn't I think of this?" Michael muttered, tapping his forehead. Of course, the Supers Association would be a good solution for getting an undead. He shook his head, feeling helpless that such an obvious solution hadn't occurred to him before. While Michael didn't know that the Supers Association sold corpses, as it wasn't something listed in their forum store, they could undoubtedly grant him access to places where acquiring a monster corpse wouldn't be an issue, such as dimensional cracks. With their access to dimensional cracks, it also made sense that the association would have access to monster corpses. As for breeding centers, though unfamiliar with them, Michael wasn't surprised by their existence. Almost every teenager under 18 aspired to either become an awakener or a cultivator. However, most were realistic enough to understand that awakening was left to fate, making cultivation the hot choice. As a result, nearly all students practiced some form of cultivation. Though the Federation suppressed information about awakeners and cultivators, a few videos still leaked. While they didn't reveal the full extent of their powers, the fact that the strongest unofficial cultivation apprentices were twice as strong as the average human was enough to inspire young people. Maybe if they knew there were strong cultivators who could crush monsters 100 feet tall, they'd take cultivation more seriously, Michael thought. But with the Federation now releasing more information about supernaturals, perhaps more students would grow interested in cultivation and take it seriously under the allure of supreme power. Returning to the topic of breeding centers, Michael wasn't shocked by their existence. In city malls, beast meat, a cultivation resource for apprentices, was openly sold, clearly sourced from monsters. If such products were available, it stood to reason that breeding centers for monsters existed too. Still, Michael was more familiar with the Supers Association than breeding centers. Until now, he hadn't even been aware breeding centers existed. Like most people, he had assumed beast meat came from dead monsters, not ones bred like livestock. After all, to the general public, monsters were nothing more than enemies. "Are monster corpses really this expensive?" Michael muttered, his eyes twitching slightly. At $3,000 per corpse, he questioned whether the $15,000 monthly benefit he received would even be enough to buy 5. Worse still, with intermediate mastery of Undead Revival, only offering a 50% success rate, there was a significant chance that a large chunk of his money could be wasted. "This is a bit too rich for me," he sighed. For someone born and raised in poverty, Liaveni was wealthy in Michael's eyes. A level 10 monster corpse wasn't going to be cheap, yet this rich guy had bought 10 at once and called it affordable. It was clear that this bro was some sort of young master. Even so, Michael was grateful for Liaveni's advice. The comment had helped him clear his thoughts significantly. Leovinny was also the only person, aside from the senior who had advised him about the ruins, to offer practical help. After sending his thanks to Leovinny, Michael logged out of the Supers Association forum and leaned back in his chair. Somehow I feel like I forgot something, Michael thought, though he dismissed the feeling after a few seconds. If it was important, it would come back to him later. His head was still buzzing from everything he had learned on the forum, leaving no room for minor distractions. Michael rested for about 10 minutes before getting up. It was close to 4:00 p.m., a perfect time to still head out. Now that he knew how to solve his undead summoning issue, he felt impatient. Deciding to freshen up to wash away some of the mental exhaustion from the land of origin, Michael prepared to visit the local Supers Association branch. I should sell some of my loot while I'm there. I'm broke. So broke. After leaving his apartment, Michael was fortunate to find a cab quickly to take him to the Supers Association. While waiting briefly for transportation, he had an impulsive thought: to run to the association at full speed and play superhero, recreating the Flash in this world. However, laziness won out in the end. That and the very real possibility of injuring someone along the way. Michael didn't want the Federation breathing down his neck. Perhaps that was why other Awakeners also kept a low profile, as there were no reports of anyone openly showing off their powers in public. Still, he wondered if things might change once the Federation released more information about Awakeners and cultivators. Perhaps they might have their rights improved, and maybe he could even use a mount-type undead in broad daylight one day. The journey to the Supers Association was uneventful. However, Michael found himself growing paranoid due to his newfound knowledge of demonic supernaturals. Before entering the cab, he even used Detect on the driver. The result was almost the same as with every other person he scanned along the way. Level 1 Human. It was unsurprising, as non-Awakeners lacked attribute points and were likely judged solely by their race. Michael recalled that a human level-up granted +02 to all stats and +05 to intelligence. By level 11, a human's average stats would match those of a new official Night Cultivator, roughly twice as strong as the average person. Coincidentally, this corresponded with the first rank in the Night Cultivator system. However, Michael wasn't entirely certain about the level representation of non-Awakeners when using Detect. It was possible that a level 10 human was more than just a human leveling up 9 times. Until confirmed, it wouldn't be wise to assume someone's prowess solely based on the level displayed. Michael was also lucky to even encounter a middle-aged man in his late 30s, the only level 11 human he met during the trip. He remembered reading on the forum when he read about members' level that only Awakeners and official cultivators under the age of 20, with rare exceptions above that age, had access to the Supers Association forum. It was noted in bold that individuals in their 30s rarely had access. It was evident that those lacking cultivation talent were left to live average lives. The Federation likely saw no benefit in sharing core supernatural knowledge with them, avoiding unnecessary risks. From this perspective, Michael found himself agreeing with the Federation's approach. He could easily imagine how panicked his aunt, who had lived her entire life in ignorance, would feel upon learning the truth about the world at her age. Would it be the crushing realization of her lack of talent that devastated her, or the fear that her children might become entangled in dangerous circumstances if they awakened or proved talented in cultivation? Michael's vivid imagination even suggested that such despair could be exploited by demonic cultivators to recruit fresh blood. Humans, after all, were complex beings capable of compromising their morals to fulfill their desires. Yet, Michael also recognized another side to the issue. If people like his aunt had been exposed to these truths earlier in life, While still young enough to adapt, they might have grown accustomed to it, just as those who lived through the Dark Age had learned to endure suppression under the supernaturals. Slowly, Michael began to understand the seniors who sighed at Aurora's current state. It was becoming increasingly clear that over 90% of its residents were delicate greenhorns, fragile enough to crumble under the slightest pressure. In this regard, Earth had an edge over Aurora. Back on Earth, even young children were aware of the world's harsh realities. In emergencies, widespread panic was less likely to erupt among Earth's population, but Michael wasn't as confident about Aurora. If the truth was revealed or a crisis arose, it might lead to an increase in demonic supernaturals instead. It wasn't impossible. While some people might be inspired to work harder after witnessing part of the full extent of a cultivator's power, potentially increasing the nation's strength and reducing pressure on the front lines, which was likely the Federation's goal, others, especially the less talented, could succumb to desperation. Demonic cultivators might exploit this desperation, offering forbidden methods to gain strength and seducing the vulnerable into their ranks. It wasn't impossible. How many people back on Earth had committed terrible acts due to poverty? If the absence of wealth could drive such actions, the lack of supernatural power could potentially lead to even worse outcomes. Anyway, the future was currently none of Michael's business. With his strength, he wasn't qualified to worry about it. If the sky fell, there were stronger people than him to hold it up. "Thanks for the ride," Michael said, paying his fare after scanning the payment code. "You're welcome," the driver replied politely. Without looking back, Michael made his way into the Supers Association. This was his second time personally entering the building. Just like yesterday, the exterior appeared quiet, but the interior was bustling with activity. Is it soundproofing magic or something? Michael wondered. Also, like yesterday, he noticed several young faces, likely new awakeners who had come to register today. As expected, there were fewer than yesterday. The notable difference was that most were casually dressed, unlike Michael and the others who had shown up in their uniforms the previous day. As he observed his surroundings, Michael lined up at the same queue leading to the receptionist who had assisted him during registration. Though they weren't particularly familiar, Michael preferred speaking with a familiar face about his matters. The queue wasn't long, so in about 20 minutes, he reached the receptionist. "Good evening," Michael greeted as they made eye contact. "Good evening, sir. How may I assist you today?" The lady replied with a professional yet slightly more genuine smile, indicating she recognized him. Michael didn't waste time and went straight to the point. "Are there any monster corpses available at the association? Also, I'd like to sell something," he said. While purchases could be made directly from the store in the forum, items were often available for immediate pickup at the association itself. However, selling could only be done in person at the association. "We do have monster corpses here, sir, but this isn't the right spot to inquire about them," the receptionist replied calmly, her expression showing no sign of surprise at the question. "Ah, I see. My apologies. Where should I go?" Michael asked softly, feeling a bit embarrassed for wasting her time. With a sweet smile, the receptionist pointed in a specific direction and provided clear instructions. "You'll find a counter with a sign that says Trade Center. That's where you can buy and sell whatever you need." "Thank you," Michael said sincerely. The receptionist nodded in acknowledgement, and Michael immediately headed toward the Trade Center. The Supers Association branch building was quite large, but it wasn't difficult to locate the area. The Trade Center resembled a shop, with a wide window counter behind which sat a middle-aged man reading a book. The man's face bore a long, hideous scar, instantly sparking Michael's curiosity. Subconsciously, Michael activated Detect as soon as he came within 10 meters, half of the skill's current range limit. Level Human. Huh, Michael froze in surprise. As if sensing something, the scarred man suddenly looked up and locked eyes with him. For reasons he couldn't quite explain, Michael's heart trembled. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story. And if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down. Our target is to get 1K subscriber. There will be SUPRISC for all of you. Stay tuned.